So NFL free agency is now open. And we've got a couple of moves here made for the Detroit Lions. So, of course, some of the early moves that have already been done include Dan Skipper retiring, a depth piece there for the offensive line. And then last week they released Graham Glasgow, which was a money-saving move, but that's still a key part of the offensive line right there. And then also trading David Montgomery to the Texans for Juice Scruggs, an offensive lineman. Again, more of a depth piece, in my opinion, for a 4th-round pick and a 7th-round pick as well, coming back in that David Montgomery deal. And then on top of that, Taylor Decker, it was announced that he was going to stave off retirement for one more year. He was going to play the season, but not returning to the Lions. So that's another big piece of the offensive line that will need filled. So with free agency opening yesterday, what do the Lions do? They go and they sign a pair of offensive linemen. So the bigger of the two signings is a center, which is a big need for the Lions. Desperately needed a center, specifically. And they signed Cade Mays, who has played for the last 4 seasons for the Carolina Panthers. Last year starting 12 of his 14 games that he appeared in. So I think this is a pretty solid signing for the Lions. A 3-year, $25 million deal. Help plug up some of these holes on the offensive line. And the other signing, I don't exactly know the terms on this yet, but Larry Borom, who spent the first 4 years of his career with the Chicago Bears and then last season with the Miami Dolphins. Last year he started 11 of his 16 games that he appeared in. So those are some of the moves that the early moves that the Lions have made so far, although they have lost a couple of players. So, of course, the Lions, with their signings, prioritizing the offensive line as they should. But looking at who they lost. So, the big one is Alex Anzalone. And it was widely reported that he was, going into free agency, that he was likely going to be not returning to the Lions for this upcoming season. Unfortunately, that came to fruition. I was a big fan of Alex Anzalone, but I'm telling you, I think, and this was part of in my opinion, the motive for getting rid of David Montgomery, but this salary situation for the Lions, I think with some of these big contracts really kicking in, it's starting to really hamper the Lions' ability to keep all these guys with this team. But Alex Anzalone, he leaves. He signs with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which was a team that I saw he was previously linked to. So Anzalone gone. Amik Robertson is gone. He ends up going to the Washington Commanders. So Amik Robertson, of course, filling a big hole for this team, especially as some of those cornerback injuries started to really pile up for the Lions last season. So no more Amik Robertson, no more Roy Lopez, who, not a starter, but he did appear in all 17 games at defensive tackle for the Lions. So more of a depth loss right there, not a huge loss right there, Roy Lopez, but still a Lion that is moving on in free agency. And then this one actually coming out today, just before the show, Kalif Raymond. He is moving on as well. He is going to join our old friend, or now no longer friend. I don't think anybody wants to call him a friend anymore. Ben Johnson. That's right. Kalif Raymond, he is moving on after spending the last 5 years in Detroit. Kalif Raymond joins the Chicago Bears. So yeah, mostly on the defensive side of the ball that the Lions are losing, but I think the biggest one obviously is Alex Anzalone and then Amik Robertson. These are the two big ones that the Lions are going to be missing. But at least on the offensive line, starting to address some of those needs early. We'll see if they make any moves now to, address some of those losses, specifically with Anzalone defensively. But otherwise, it's early. It's only one day really into free agency. And we had a lot of other crazy moves that happened yesterday as we at least break down some of these significant moves that happened. I think one of the biggest ones was the kind of shock, although not really shock. This was kind of rumored that was going to happen, but Tua Tagovailoa cut by the Dolphins and ended up having them take on a $99 million of a dead cap room for having to release Tua, and Tua immediately goes and signs with the Atlanta Falcons. So that was a pretty interesting move yesterday. I think not necessarily going to the Falcons being a big move, but just being cut and having that much dead cap being left with the Dolphins. Imagine being the Dolphins and, imagine being Tua and your team is paying $99 million to have you not play for them. That's quite brutal right there. Mike Evans, longtime wide receiver of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 12-year career, signs a 3-year deal with the San Francisco 49ers. That's a pretty big pickup. This one's pretty interesting. Travis Etienne from Jacksonville, he signs a 4-year deal with the Saints, which is pretty interesting. I don't know why you'd go there. That's a rebuilding team, but hey, get your bag, I guess. 4-year, $52 million deal for Travis Etienne. Wan'Dale Robinson, 4-year deal to the Titans. Moving on from the Giants. Malik Willis, the Dolphins, going back to Tua Tagovailoa. Dolphins sign Malik Willis back up with Green Bay after, having some solid stints filling in for, the injured Jordan Love occasionally during the season. So the Dolphins have their next quarterback. And another big one, Kenneth Walker, the Super Bowl MVP with the Seattle Seahawks. He moves on. He goes to the Kansas City Chiefs, signing a 3-year deal. So that's going to be a huge addition for the Chiefs as they try to get back into the playoffs after a little bit surprisingly missing the playoffs this past season. Of course, injuries having a lot to do with that. But even before injuries, that they were just not really looking that good. And then speaking of Kansas City, Travis Kelce, he comes back. I know it was floated around last year that Travis Kelce might be retiring after this past season. I think everybody knew it was more likely that he was going to stick around. So not all that surprising right there. So Travis Kelce re-signs. And then, yeah. So those are some of the big free agency moves. I think otherwise, the biggest move over the weekend before free agency opened was the trade for Max Crosby. Max Crosby going to the Baltimore Ravens. So that's a pretty significant move as well. But I know that was rumored, maybe some linking with the Detroit Lions with Max Crosby. But, I think everybody, myself included, thought that was going to be a little bit more of a outside chance, given the Lions' salary situation and what they would have to give up. A couple first-round picks given up from the Ravens in order to acquire Max Crosby. So, bit of a hefty price, but the Ravens really trying to shore up on the defensive side of the ball. Pretty brutal defense that Baltimore had last year. And last but not least, another big deal was the Rams trading for cornerback Trent McDuffie from the Kansas City Chiefs and immediately making him the highest paid CB in NFL history. 4-year, $124 million extension, $100 million guaranteed. So that was a pretty big trade as well. Trading a first round, fifth round, and sixth round picks for this upcoming NFL draft, and then a third round pick in next year's draft. So pretty significant draft capital from the Rams to get McDuffie. But, hey, immediately signing him to an extension. So some of the bigger moves that have happened. But, man, it stinks to get rid of Anzalone, but I just think that is a growing trend with this Lions team in terms of, you know, the salary situation. Have to make it a couple cuts if you want to keep some of these big guys like, you know, Jared Goff, Penei Sewell, Aiden Hutchinson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, to name a few. You know, unfortunately, some guys are going to get lost in the fold, and you're not able to keep some of these players. So we're already seeing a little bit of that here. But in terms of, like, starters, you know, the Lions are, you know, down a couple of those players, specifically Anzalone, Glasgow, starters that they'll be, you know, trying to have those holes filled, which they're already filling those holes on the offensive line. So, again, only one day into free agency. We'll see what else happens for this Lions team and other big moves potentially that happen. But we'll continue to watch that space.
If you missed today's installment of On the Docket, podcast it at foxsports1019.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to tune in live weekdays at noon on Jackson's Fox Sports 101.9 FM.